Hello, Ms. Bushna. For my ISU, I will be discussing about two poems that I have chosen to analyze. Let's get this going. For the first poem, I shall be talking about No Man's Land by James H. K. Knight. James A. Knight Akin was also known as Jack Knight. He was an American World War I pilot. He flew across the country with mail on February 22, 1921. He was also a poet and was known for two poems, one being No Man's Land and the other being On Les Ura. His poems are filled with great imagery and symbolism. Now you have some background information. Let's listen to the poem.
No man's land is an eerie sight, at early dawn in the pale gray light. Never a house and never a hedge, in no man's land from edge to edge. And never a living soul walks there, to taste the fresh of the morning air. Only some lumps of rotting clay, that were friends or foemen yesterday. What are the bounds of no man's land? You can see them clearly on either hand. A mound of ragbags gray in the sun, or a furrow of brown where the earthworks run. From the eastern hills to the western sea, through field or forest, over river and lea, no man may pass them but aim you well, and death rides across on the bullet or shell. But no man's land is a goblin sight, when patrols crawl over at dead o' night. Boche or British, Belgian or French, you dice with death when you cross the trench. When the rapid, like fireflies in the dark, flits down the parapet spark by spark, and you drop for cover to keep your head, with your face on the breast of the 4 months dead. The man who ranges in no man's land is dogged by the shadows on either hand. When the star shells flare as it bursts o'erhead, scares the gray rats that feed on the dead. And the bursting bomb or the bayonet snatch may answer the click of your safety catch. For the lone patrol, with his life in his hands, is hunting for blood in no man's land.
Let's begin with the analysis. For starters, the theme of this poem is simply the description of entering no man's land and the fear that follows from it. This poem uses the rhyme scheme of AABB. The point of view this poem takes is definitely a negative one indeed. It talks about how frightening the thought of entering no man's land can truly be. The conflict which occurs in this poem is person versus the world. In the short story, the Diamond Necklace, the woman is forced to live her life in pain and believes there is no way out of her misery. It states, every month it was necessary to renew some notes, thus obtain time, and to pay others, and this life lasted for 10 years. And in the poem, it is also nearly certain that there will be no survival when it states, you dice with death when you cross the trench. Here it tries to say that every time you are within no man's land, you are taking a chance with your life, and there is no way out of this misery. Now let's take a look at the psychological criticism, not the whole theory. Let's take a look at Sigmund Freud's view of the human mind, which is represented as an iceberg. Sigmund Freud believes that there are three levels of the human mind, which are conscience, which is only about 10% of the human mind, and here is where the thoughts are stored. Following that is preconscious, which is near 10% of this part, and this part contains memories and finally unconscious sector that is about 80% of the human mind, and this is where feud and unmoral urges lie. Personally, in this poem, I believe as it was written, the thoughts were provoked in the unconscious state of the human mind. It states, it's hunting for blood in no man's land. This is just one of the many prime examples which shows the fear and nerve-wracking thoughts in which this poem was written. The man in the novel The War shares the same type of emotion which is presented within the poem, and that emotion is fear. In both contexts, they do not want to die but still have a chance to do so. Allusion also consists within the poem. It is used in the first stanza when it states, in no man's land from edge to edge, and near a living soul walks there. As many know, World War I was thought out to be a short war, but that wasn't the case. The one aspect which prolonged this was no man's land. Many soldiers were dying at a skyrocketing rate. Many were getting infected due to the living conditions that came with living in the trenches. The author does not give a lot of information, but allows the reader to grasp enough the importance of no man's land, and allows the reader to understand how horrifying the sight can be, and to add which states, edge to edge, that falls under repetition. Here the author uses the help of repetition to put emphasis on how much of a massive amount of land space is taken up by no man's land. To end this analysis, let's take a look at the rich imagery and symbolism which is used. But no man's land is a gobbling sight. As we all know that a gobbling sight is creature that is terrifying and frightening to all. Here the fear is represented by a goblin. Another one is from the east hill to the western sea. Here the poet is trying to emphasize that no man's land extends farther than the human eye can see. He is trying to get his readers to understand that no man's land is huge dead zone. And lastly was you dice with death when you cross the Trent. With the dice unmentioned, there is a chance that the number you choose might not appear. The dice here symbolizes chance. The poet is stating that there is a chance that you will not come back after you enter no man's land, and that concludes the first poem. Now, let's take a look at the second poem. The second poem that I chose to do for my ISU was A Line Storm Song by Robert Frost. Let's start with some background information on the poet Robert Frost. He was born on March 26, 1874 in San Francisco. In 1912, he moved to England with his family, and at this time he was writing a well-known poem that goes by the name of Boy's Will. Now you know a little about Robert Frost. Let's talk about the poem.
The line storm clouds fly tattered and swift. The road is forlorn all day, where a myriad snowy quartz stones lift, and the hoof prints vanish away. The roadside flowers, too wet for the bee, expend their bloom in vain. Come over the hills and far with me, and be my love in the rain. The birds have less to say for themselves, in the wood world's torn despair, than now these numberless years the elves, although they are no less there. All song of the woods is crushed like some wild, easily shattered rose. Come, be my love in the wet woods, come, where the boughs rain when it blows. There is the gale to urge behind, and brood our singing down, and the shallow waters aflutter with wind, from which to gather your gown. What matter if we go clear to the west, and come not through dry shod? For wilding broach shall wet your breast, the rain fresh goldenrod. Oh, never this whelming east wind swells, but it seems like the sea's return to the ancient lands where it left the shells, before the age of the fern. And it seems like the time when after doubt, our love came back amain. Oh, come forth into the storm and rout, and be my love in the rain.
So the theme of this poem talks about obstacles that are being faced, and these obstacles described in great detail. To add, it talks about the hardships of love. While reading this poem, I got my interpretation of the poem, but when I researched further on, I found readers had their own different interpretations of this poem. But from what I read, I believe this poem starts off with the concern that his beloved partner will not follow him, but still has the hope that she will. But then as the poem moves forward, I start to see the hope getting stronger. He continues to describe the barriers that he will be facing, but also proves that his love is strong enough, and at the end of the poem, his beloved actually joins him. This poem takes the rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, and also this poem's point of view is not set one. It starts off a negative one, but gradually turns into a positive one. The conflict that occurs within this poem is a person versus person. This poem contains various elements for starters imagery. In the beginning it states, the road is forlorn all day. This gives an image that the relationship of these two lovers is weak and lacks determination to fix the problems. This can also be a case of hyperloop, because here the author is over-exaggerating to put emphasis on the fact that their love is full of aloneness and sadness. Another case of imagery is when it states, expended their bloom in vain. Their love for each other has a lot of regret. When flowers bloom, it is usually a beautiful sight, but here, when their love started off, it started in hopeless manner. Here also, hyperloop can be used because it shows that reader that when their love started off, it was in pain. The flower is their love, and it bloomed in plain. Another element of symbolism in this poem, we see a lot of that first off when it states, wild, easily shattered rose. Roses are a symbol of love and romance, but the word shattered shows breaking and separation, and that is what the poet is trying to show, that the love is not strong enough and it is broken. With the same quotation, it falls below the device which goes by the name of foreshadowing. The poet is warning the readers for what is to come, so when the last outcome does occur, the reader is not shocked. From the start, we presume that the love will not last, but the sudden shock is what the poem wanted the reader to experience. He wanted to get the reader the message, true love controls all, to the reader. Also personification is available in this poem. To quote, "The birds have less to say for themselves. Here birds are giving human-like features, which is speaking as we know that birds are not able to talk. There is also a metaphor which is as quote, what matters if we go clear to the west and come not through dry shore." In this quote, the poet compares the feelings of being wet to the horrid experiences that he has come across. Let's move on to some theories. This poem can be analyzed in formalist perspective when it comes down to tension and amiability. In this poem, there is one main form of tension which is shown clearly, and that is will the speaker's love join him in the obstacles that come their way and be able to face them as one. Throughout the poem, this tension is carried on from stanza to stanza when finally we see them being together at the end of the poem. And then arbitrary personality when analyzing this poem. I found that there can be many interpretations of the poem as a whole, and then going on the internet and finding out more about this poem, I realized that this whole poem is a form of ambiguity because there are multiple ways of interpreting this text. Another theory that can be used is psychological criticism. As I mentioned before, there are three ways Sigmund Freud lays out the human mind, which is conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. Personally, I believe this poem is also written in an unconscious state of mind, because in this poem I see the fear of the speaker not being able to be with his loved one due to the barriers that are put on them, and as I mentioned before, fear lies on the third sector of the mind, which is unconscious mind. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy.